While he's getting that up, wow, look at this room. I am so excited to be here. And I had the opportunity to meet many of the panelists. And in looking at the roster of speakers and the content, this is going to be a fantastic day. And I'm very honored to be here with you all. When I asked Chrissy and Megan what they would like me to speak with you about this morning, they said, just tell your story. So, here goes. My mother, who I wish could be here with me today, but my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My father was an entrepreneur, which means he owned a sewing machine and vacuum cleaner store in New York City. And neither of them went to college. And they were great role models in terms of teaching me work ethic, but I didn't really have any business role models. I don't think I even knew anybody in business. So when I was little, my role models were my teachers, and from the time I was very young, I wanted to be a second grade teacher. And anyone who knows me knows I am really determined and really goal-oriented, so from the minute I decided that was my goal. Well, when it was time to go to college, I asked my advisors, and they said that the best places for getting an education in education, back in the mid-'70s, was Massachusetts. And so I looked at various schools, and when my mother and I came to UMass, I fell in love with the campus. I fell in love with the school. I got a great education, and I had a fabulous college experience. I lived in Southwest in Paterson, so I had a really fun time. But the problem was, when I graduated in 1978, there were no teaching jobs, like none. I sent my resume, no joke, to about 100 different schools. I think I got one job offer as a student teacher in Millers Falls, Massachusetts, where I student taught making minimum wage as an aide. So that wasn't going to cut it. So I moved home, and I did what you did back then. I looked in the newspaper, and I answered an ad that said, work with computers, interesting work, no typing necessary. Now think about that for a minute. Okay, so I go on this interview, and computers back then were actually rooms. So this was filing computer tapes. Talk about false advertising. There was nothing interesting about that job. But the guy who interviewed me, a guy named Carl, I said no. He realized I was overqualified to file computer tapes, and he asked me if I wanted to apply for a job as a Gal Friday. Now, I'm not making this up. There was a job then called a Gal Friday, which was kind of below a secretary. And I said, no, I don't think so. And then, one of my lessons is you always bring your A game. So even though this job didn't interest me at all, I still, brought my A game, and he took a liking to me. And he said, you know what? I want to bring you upstairs to meet with Tom, the president of the company. I didn't even know what the company did. It turned out it was a company called Home Testing Institute. It was a market research firm. And Tom and I hit it off, and on the spot he said, I'd like to offer you a job as a project director. I was like, project director? Wow, okay, that sounds good. And I said, but when I sit down at my desk, what will I do? And he said, don't worry, we'll teach you. And I took the job, and I loved it. I got to write questionnaires, which was kind of like writing quizzes in education, and I had clients, and that was the beginning of my career in market research. So I started in the 70s as a project director, and there I am rocking the Farrah Fawcett do. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Then after a couple of years, I left. I didn't burn any bridges behind me, but it was time to move on. I went to another company, and I got into sales. And then a funny thing happened. NPD, my current company, bought Home Testing Institute. And people had remembered me, and they called me up, and they recruited me to come back in a sales position. So I went back to Home Testing Institute in sales, and then I advanced to sales manager, and there I am in the 80s. I love the 80s. I'm still waiting for shoulder pads to come back. I think I'm going to be waiting a long time. But I advanced to sales manager. When I moved back to Home Testing Institute, I got married. Over the course of the next few years, I had my daughter Danielle, my son Eric, and I had advanced to a position of being in charge of a pretty big group. It was about a $40 million division. And then the owner of the company decided to do a big reorganization. And instead of having two major divisions, he decided to split the company into small business units, each headed up by a business unit president. But what he did was brilliant because he didn't put any names in the boxes. And he said, you can apply for the job that's most logically yours, or you can apply for a different job. And by now, I'd been doing my job for a pretty long time. I had a fabulous boss who I loved, but I'd been working for her for over 10 years. And so you get to a point where you just start getting a little stale. And so I grappled with it, and I decided that I would raise my hand to go to another division and a whole nother job, which was kind of risky. It was almost like switching companies, but within the same company. And so I got accepted into that job, but a strange thing happened. All of my peers and all of my friends got promoted to business unit presidents. But because I had moved and I didn't have experience in this new side, I did not get promoted. And that was really tough, because here I watched all my friends getting this title of president, and I didn't. And that was hard. So I took the job, and I said I'm going to give it my best. And then I asked my boss to go out for a career development lunch. And I said, and he said, so what are your goals, Karyn? And I said, well, I want to keep growing, I want to develop, I want to get promoted to a business unit president. And he said, Karyn, you have it all wrong. Your goal should be to be president of the company. Now, I'm not being falsely modest. I was like, what? This little kid who wanted to be an elementary education teacher, I didn't see it. But he said that should be your goal. So eventually I did get promoted to president of Beauty, Home, and Fashion. I loved this job. And then a strange thing happened. The owner of the company took my boss and moved him on to a big new innovation job. And he said that he wanted to promote me to be head of all the business units in my division. You want to guess what I said? I said no. I love my job, I love my team, I loved my clients. And he very smartly said, I think you should go home and sleep on that. So I went home, no joke, I cried the whole way home. And I got home and I talked to my husband, and he's like, Kar, what's the problem? You can do this job. I'm like, well, I love my clients, I love my job. And then he said, Kar, if you don't take that job, someone else will. Oh. So I really thought about it. I thought about my peers and what we had accomplished in beauty, home, and fashion, and I realized that I actually was the best person for the job. And so I went in and I accepted the job. And then, so I did get promoted to the group president. And I had a variety of those moments where I had to go home and sleep on it. I was offered the opportunity to take on international, not moving there, but taking responsibility for Europe and then for Asia. And each time I had to go home and sleep on it. I eventually did become president of NPD, and now I am president and chief operating officer. So when people, let me tell you just a quick little bit about NPD, just so put it in perspective. We are a global company. We have over 1,500 employees. We're privately held. We're over $350 million in revenue. We collect information from retailers. When you go into Bloomingdale's and you buy mascara and they scan it, we get that data. You go to Best Buy and you buy a TV and they scan it, we get that. We compile all that information. We also do surveys with consumers online and new innovative technology where we collect receipts from consumers. So we know everything that's happening in an industry. And we help companies get the right product in the right place for the right people at the right price at the right time. And we do this across 21 different industries. I won't say if I have any favorites. But it spans apparel and beauty and consumer electronics, et cetera. And we do it for all the major companies in those industries. It's a really cool job. So people ask, how did I get here? And basically, what I usually say is, I work really hard. I'm still in the office at 7:30 in the morning. My parents instilled a great work ethic in me, and I work hard. This is a client and friend of mine, Bracken Darrell, the CEO of Logitech. He was recently quoted in the New York Times when he was asked about his career, and he said, just work really, really hard. It's amazing how good life is if you work hard. Second, set goals. Goals are free, they don't cost you anything, and they're so effective. And I couldn't agree more. The other thing I say when people ask how I got to where I am is I volunteered for everything, all the time. So in fact, when I came back to Home Testing Institute as a salesperson, there was a need for a sales manual to be written. I didn't know anything about writing a sales manual, but I said, I'll do it. That's actually the real sales manual from Home Testing Institute. And so I wrote the sales manual. Well, when it was time to promote somebody to the manager, kind of who better than the person who had written the sales manual? And I volunteered for task forces, I volunteered for committees. That's how you kind of make yourself known and you show that you're willing to go above and beyond. So a couple of other quotes: believe in possibilities and take on every opportunity that comes your way, because you never know what assignment might open the next door. And I like this one too. Leadership is a state of mind, not a title or a box on an org chart. Take responsibility for moving things forward, and you'll be amazed at how many people follow you. You don't need a title to be a leader. There's a whole book on that. Okay, so in 1993, a group of women from Ms. Magazine came up with the concept of the first Take Our Daughters to Work Day. This is my daughter, Danielle. And the concept was to teach young girls self-esteem and to show them career options that they had no idea, like I had no idea of anything besides being a teacher or a nurse. So, and it worked, because my daughter Danielle, when people would ask her, Danielle, what do you want to be when you grow up? She said, I want to be a vice president. And if they said, what's a vice president? She'd say, I don't know, but I want to be a vice president. And then, flash forward 20 years, Danielle starts working in advertising. And she found that she knew things that her peers didn't know. And they would come to her for advice on how to deal with their boss or how to deal with a coworker. And here she is, like, doling out advice. So one thing is, when you all get started, I know you're going to be the youngest people in the room. Like, get over it. Because age doesn't matter. It's really experience and skills and such that matters. But when Danielle was little and we would be driving in the car, we would play the interview game. I would say things to her like, so Danielle, for what things have you been criticized? And if she wanted a sleepover, I would make her do a presentation on why she shouldn't be able to have a sleepover. True stories, really. So she had gained all these skills, and she said to me, Mom, I know all these things because I had you as my mother. She goes, you should write a book. And in fact, she came up with the name, and it's Mom BA. And I was so fortunate to connect with Alex Levitt, who's written 7 books, and we're collaborating, and we're writing Mom BA. And in fact, we have a publisher, Motivational Press, and I'm hoping it'll come out this summer or fall. So the idea of it is just essential business advice from one generation to the next, kind of told in stories and anecdotes. And I was so delighted when I looked at the agenda for today, because it's so many of the things that are in the book, and I'm looking forward to learning more as well, because you never stop learning. But it's things like first impressions, and I know TJX, Lori will be presenting Dress for Success later, networking and relationships, surviving your boss, managing and motivating others, dealing with difficult situations, skilling up, leadership. I know there's a lot on leadership today, and so on. And because over 30 plus years, I've developed a lot of close relationships and friends with people, I've asked them to share words of wisdom, which I've kind of sprinkled in the presentation and also in the book. So I wanted to just share with you a couple of things from this and some of the key lessons I've learned along the way. And one is on networking, because obviously this is a great opportunity today for networking. And this is a great quote: build your network, Your connections are the potential currency that will increase opportunity for you your entire career. Learn the give to get philosophy. Help those get what they're seeking, whether by opportunity or mutual introduction. The possibilities are endless. And realize that doing great work and producing results isn't enough. Build strong relationships and high visibility. So I want to tell you a quick story. Well, it's not that quick, but it's a good story about networking. And the most important thing about networking to me is that it's not quantity, it's quality. It's not about how many business cards you connect or how many LinkedIn contacts you make. It's about making an authentic, real connection with somebody where there's potential for mutual benefit down the road. So, last January, I was at the Consumer Electronics Show, and I met Leslie Grieve. Leslie had just moved companies. She was a big NPD supporter. She and I chatted. I thanked her for her support and for her business. She had just moved to Utah. We had a whole chat about her experience and her kids and moving. And she said, "Do you know Carol Campbell?" I said, "No." Well, Carol Campbell heads up, she's the founder and CEO of Women in Consumer Technology. So I said, "Oh, it would be great if you could introduce us." Carol's in California. I said to her, "When you come to New York, let's get together for breakfast." Oh, speaking of breakfast, I love breakfast. I'm a morning person, and I was doing power breakfasts before they were even a thing. And there are days, no joke, where I have had 3 breakfast meetings. You just don't eat too much. So anyway, Carol and I meet for breakfast. We totally hit it off. I was telling her about the book, and she said, "Oh, I have a conference in June. Would you be a speaker?" And then we decided to invite my daughter and have it be kind of a fireside chat, boomer, millennial, point counterpoint thing. So we went to the conference. We got to meet Gail Sheehy, who wrote Passages, so that was fun. And the moderator of our fireside chat was Andrea Smith. And Andrea and I had dinner together the night before, and we totally hit it off. And I was having a conference up here in Boston for 300 of our senior level clients, and I asked Andrea to come and moderate a panel for me. And I invited Carol as well. So while we're at the conference, Carol meets Dawn Unser, who works for NPD and speaks about retail trends. And Carol invites Dawn to speak at a conference she's having with a whole bunch of retailers, which is good for NPD because retailers are really important to us. So Dawn goes and speaks at her conference in California. Now, while he's there, Carol says, "Hey, Dawn, we have this awards thing at the Consumer Electronics Show. Would you nominate Karyn for this award?" So Dawn nominates me for the award, and then I win this Women in Consumer Technology award that you spoke about. So at the awards thing, I get a table. I invite Leslie as my guest because she started the whole thing. And then afterwards, we go to this ICE event that NPD was hosting for our clients. Oh, by the way, if you've never been to an ICE bar, it is so much fun. I had like the best time ever at this ICE thing. Who would have thought? So Leslie's at the ICE bar. The CMO of NPD meets Leslie, and she says, "Karyn, we've been looking for a client to speak at our NPD officers meeting in New Orleans this spring. What about Leslie?" We ask Leslie, and Leslie's coming to speak at our conference. So the point is, it's not about quantity, it's about quality, making an authentic, real connection. And there's a million tips on how you can do that if you're at a situation I'm looking forward to hearing at the networking session. I'm sure they'll share some of those as well. Oh, and just one other thing. I'm a big fan of writing handwritten notes when I meet people. My daughter would say that's old-fashioned, but she's entitled to her point of view. But one of my things that I do is if I am going to connect with someone on LinkedIn, I always personalize it. And it's a real pet peeve to me when people reach out and don't personalize it. If you care enough to make that connection, take 2 minutes and personalize it. Oh, and by the way, those are on the back of my door at work. That's just a small sampling of all the different conferences I go to. The other one is to be yourself. I do remember the 80s when women dressed as men with bow ties and all. And I think it's really important to still keep some of yourself in what you do. So here's a quote from the SVP of Hewlett-Packard. "I would advise young women to be true to their own brand Everyone has their own style, intellect, goals, an area of expertise. And create your own differentiated personal brand that distinguishes you from others. Don't be afraid to be yourself. That's what makes you unique. So you can't really see it on this screen, but the background's pink. I love pink. I have always loved pink. If you looked back at my office when Danielle was in my office, there's a lot of pink accessories. I have a pink phone case. And, you know, although today I did wear purple. I'd like to say I did that on purpose, but I didn't. So I was so delighted to see in last week's issue of the Wall Street Journal where they said it was okay for women to wear pink. Well, they're finally getting with it. But the other thing is to not take yourself so seriously. You have to be able to have a sense of humor. You know, I work really hard, and what I do sometimes is really tough, but you still have to be able to laugh and make fun of yourself. So one time in our Chicago office, they were having a meeting, and it was on Halloween. And they asked everybody to come dressed in costume. I was like, oh, all right, I want to play, but what do I do? So Danielle says to me, you know, Mom, you have that pink jacket, you have those pink shoes. I told you I like pink. She goes, why don't you go dressed as corporate Barbie? And I was like, okay, I can do that. The only problem is I'm a little worried that they won't realize I'm in costume. So in fact, I went as corporate Barbie, and I told a client of mine from Mattel this story recently, and she actually sent me a corporate Barbie doll, which I now have in my office. So again, you can be hard driving at work and still be yourself and not take yourself too seriously. So everyone always asks about the balancing act, and I can't wait to listen in on the session later today as well. Oprah Winfrey said, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. I would suggest that what you do is ask yourself what having it all means for you, because that's a very individual, personal thing, and it's different for every single person. For me, when I was very little, I also knew that I wanted to get married and I wanted to have children. That was absolutely a given. I didn't actually know that I was going to have this amazing career. That part was the surprise. So when the time came, I wasn't willing to give up on either of those for me. Now, that's not to say, okay, in this one, don't look at my hair. You look at my living room. We're looking at my living room, which had no furniture. But I will tell you, my driver's license still has that hairstyle. When do you ever get rid of this? So anyway, it doesn't mean that there weren't sacrifices. So my company had offered me the opportunity to get an executive MBA that they would pay for. And it was right about that time, and I had to decline. You know, I was working full time, I had 2 kids, I had a husband. That was the one thing I couldn't add to my plate. We didn't have furniture. I didn't watch TV. I barely read the newspaper. I didn't work out. The only friends I had were friends that had kids my kids' age. And so, you know, there are sacrifices that you make, but it's really deciding what matters to you. I was able to get married, have a family. There's my boss, Todd, on the right side, and my partner in crime, Tom, from work. And then 20 years later, I'm still happily married. I have great kids. Now, they still won't let me live down the time when I forgot to feed them dinner. And I did really once leave them at religious school and forget to pick them up. But you know what? They still turned out okay. And I think I was a decent role model, and they both have jobs, and they both have significant others, and we're all very close, and I still love my job. And my living room has furniture now. So it's a journey, and the truth of the matter is that you really don't know. I had no idea. I had no plan. I wanted to be a teacher. So it is a journey, and plan your career to be a lifelong journey. And don't worry so much. I was talking to some of you who don't know what you want to do. It's okay. You have a long time ahead of you. Strategically, use the first years of work to gain diverse experience and expand your skill set. And once you've mastered something, don't be afraid to move on. And there will be roadblocks along the way. You know, the first one for me, my whole childhood, I wanted to be a teacher. And I had to completely pivot at that point. And then there was another roadblock when all my friends got promoted to business unit presidents, and I took this lateral move. And that was tough, but sometimes you need to do that in order to get new skills to be more valuable in the long run. And then the other one that still really bothers me is that as women, we get in our own way. And I hope that that's not still as true as it was when I was at UMass. I was at a women's food service conference with 1,000 women about 15 years ago. And the speaker, who was great, said, let's imagine that there's a job as a CEO of a company, and the only criteria is that you have to be able to breastfeed. Now she says, I guarantee that there'll be men going, ooh, okay, I know that I can't actually breastfeed, but my wife has 4 kids, I've watched her do it, I've helped, give me a shot. Give me a shot, I can do this job. And the women would be like, I don't know, I'm not sure, they're big enough, small enough. And then she went on, this is 15 years ago, she went on to talk about the imposter syndrome, which I'm sure now you've all heard about. It's basically where accomplished people feel like they're frauds. And I was like, oh my God, that's a thing? Like other people feel that way? It's not just me? And I'm not kidding. I used to always think that somebody's going to figure out that I was an elementary education major at UMass. And I never took a business course in my life. And I like to read People magazine. And that I would be found out. And when I heard that this was a thing, and I talked to other women, and so many other people felt that way, it was the most liberating moment of my life. I mean, it really was. So I look at all of you, and you have so much more going for you. You have a business education, you have many more role models, like today, all the panelists. And so I just say believe in yourselves. Don't let yourself get in the way, because you can be anything. And so just a few closing thoughts. Work hard. I really do feel that's important. Give it your A game all the time. Track your accomplishments. I told my daughter to do this and others. Keep a list of the things that you do and look at it. First of all, it makes you feel good. And then when it's time for a promotion, you can kind of look at that list and say, hey, I've accomplished these things. I'm ready for a promotion. Don't compare yourself to others. Focus on yourself and building your own skills. We all talk about improving our weaknesses, and that is important, but also think about what you're good at, what your passion is, what you really enjoy, and focus on that. Because if you can find a job that matches your passions and your interests, you'll be much happier. Find people who believe in you. I was very fortunate that throughout my career I had people who pushed me along. But it wasn't just luck. I did work hard, I did earn their respect, I did volunteer for things, so it goes both ways. Say thank you. Say thank you to people who help you. But also, if somebody gives you a compliment and says, hey, you did a really great job, don't say, oh no, wasn't that good? Just say thank you. And remember, even brilliant and famous people sometimes admit to feeling like frauds, and just keep a sense of humor. If you make a mistake, just pick yourself up and keep going. And finally, don't get so hung up on worrying all about yourself. If you do the rest of these things, you'll be fine. And I love this quote from C.S. Lewis, focus on helping others. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, anything is possible. Thank you. I promised I'd leave time for questions.
So when is the book coming out?
I'm hoping this summer or early fall.
Will we get some copies?
Sure.
Okay.
You can have 400 copies. I think you might have to pay something for them, though. Well, who knew? I didn't know I was going to be the president and COO, and I certainly didn't think I would be a writer. So you just never know.
Describe what your typical day is like. You talk about working hard, but what exactly does that mean in terms of working hard? You're in the office
Okay.
What else? Working some days a week?
So what does working hard mean? It's not necessarily about time. It's not just about time. It's about giving it your all to everything you do. So when my kids were, and I'll do my typical day in a minute, but when my kids were little, when I was at work, I was 100% at work. And when I was at home, I was 100% at home. Now, we didn't have email back then, and we didn't have cell phones and all of that, so it was different. But I had a philosophy that if my kid took their first step and I wasn't there to see it, it didn't count. Really, it just didn't count until I got home and saw it. It was that focus is really what I mean. I don't have a typical day. I do get in early because I like to have some time to get organized early in the morning. And it's a combination of internal meetings. I like to get out and see clients. That's really important to me, so it's clients. I love to do one-on-ones with people because it's really important to do mentoring. And since I was an education major, and I still love teaching, I teach about 4 courses a year at work on things like developing client relationships and dealing with difficult situations. So what's one of the things I love about the job is that it's very diverse. Now today, I don't know it's a double-edged sword. I don't know whether it's better or worse that you can take an afternoon off and watch your kids play soccer and be reachable for an important client meeting, so that's good. But then you can be, at home at night trying to be with your kids and you get an important client call. So that always connected is hard, and I think you just have to try to compartmentalize and just focus really hard and be present in your present.
Can you talk about the learning curve that you experienced going from an associate to being a manager and knowing what to do when you're responsible for other people and not just yourself all of a sudden?
Did everybody hear the question? Well, for me, it was a very jarring experience. I was a salesperson, and in sales, it's all about yourself. It's all about making your numbers. And then I got promoted to sales manager, and to be frank, I was a terrible manager because I still had clients of my own. So people would come to my office, and I would be sitting behind my desk, and I just could not wait for them to leave so I could get back to my own work. And we did a manager review where you got graded by your subordinates, and I got like this horrible grade. And I was devastated because I never got bad grades. I always try to get A's. And I had to make a fundamental decision. Did I want to be a really good individual contributor and salesperson, or did I want to be a manager? And it's a very different job. And so I decided I wanted to be a manager, and then I took courses, I gave up my clients, and I realized that my success was 100% dependent upon them being successful. So all my energy had to go to helping them be the best that they could be and not worry as much about myself, which was a big transition. But thank you, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Where did the inspiration for your book come from?
Well, it's totally my daughter. So when she started working, she basically really did say, she knew things like, don't sell after the close. I don't know how many of you know that. But when she was little, and she wanted to have a sleepover, no joke, I made her and her friends do a presentation, and they went through all the reasons they should have a sleepover, and then we said, okay, and then they kept talking. And I said, don't sell after the close. And so she knew these things, and then she said, you should write this book on all these things that I've learned over 30 years, and it was the name was her idea too. So, and that's how it happened.
Thank you for such a wonderful speech. I am curious, and I would ask you to speak to managing the relationships you have within your network. How do you maintain such deep personal connections with such an expansive group of people?
Good question. I don't think about it as quantity. I think about it as quality. So it's very individual. When you're talking to somebody, you really want to be focused 100% on that person, not looking about who else can I be talking with. And another tip is write everything down. Now there's you could do it in Salesforce or something, but you won't remember things about people, and so it's really important to document it so that when you talk to them again, you can say, hey, I know your kid was trying to get into UMass. How's that going? Or into Isenberg. How's that going? I might be able to have a connection. And the other one is, like the quote said, try to do for others. So if somebody I know is out of work, I'll always say to them, send me a resume, let me see if I can help. I don't know if I can or can't, but I always try to help other people. And maybe they'll help me back, maybe not, but you never know where those connections will lead. So it's authentic, it's really caring about the other people, getting to know them, remembering things about them. And then names. I have a whole thing I could tell you on how to remember names. It's my superpower. Really, we acquired a company recently in York, England, and there were about 30 people, and we spent a little time. They went around, introduced themselves, and then they asked questions, and at the end I was able to name 95% of them. So I have my tricks.
Thank you for a great speech. I'm back here. Kind of two-part question. Such a fantastic company, you touch so many different companies and industries. Have you ever been tempted to jump? And your resume is so fascinating that, I think for many of the women in the audience who are just starting off, they're going to jump a lot in their career. Any advice on when to stay, when to go?
That's a great question. For me, I was fortunate in that because I worked hard and got promoted and worked hard and got promoted, I never really had the chance to get bored. And if it's a good company, like we're privately held, we invest for the long run, I love the culture. So if you're in a good company, don't jump just because everybody says you should only stay 2 years and leave. And also, don't let people tell you that you're too young or you haven't been in a job long enough. That happened to my people I know who they would say, okay, I'm ready for the promotion, I've checked all the boxes, and somebody said, well, you're not in your job long enough. Not a good reason. If you've really checked the boxes and you have accomplished the skills and you're ready for that next level, and then befriend HR so that you can say to them, hey, I really like this company, I'd really like to stay, but I need to be able to advance. Because it is a shame that today most of the way that you get ahead is by jumping to other companies. So I think it's not so much when to move, it's about finding whether the company is a fit with you, whether what they do, what their business model is, appeals to you, and most importantly, whether their culture fits with you. Because that it's really hard to change a company culture. So if it's, and there's different, we're a very collaborative culture. There are some that are much more hard-driven. In finance, you'll find a lot of companies that are more hard-driven. So if you find a good cultural fit and a business model you like, try to figure out how to stay by getting more experience within that organization. But if you're stuck and you're not getting the opportunities, that's when you want to move on.
Can we just have one more question?
I'm wondering what type of support you had at home and how important that was in your career.
So I assume you mean when I was with raising kids and working and all that. Well, first of all, my husband Brad is fantastic. He married me because of who I am. Well, one quick thing. In one of my job switches, I had gotten a pretty big salary increase when I moved from one company to another. And my mother, who I love and who's a great role model, said, Karyn, you're going to be making so much money, it's going to be hard to find a husband. And I was like, no, Mom, I am who I am, and the guy I'm going to marry is going to have to accept all of this. So my husband, loves me for who I am, and so there was never a question as to whose career was more important. And he's a cardiologist, so he's got a pretty big job. So he was super, super supportive. And then the other thing is, again, I was fortunate that I had the finances to be able to do certain things, but I definitely recommend that you outsource as much as possible. We didn't have furniture, so we could afford, to have a nanny, if you can. Or just things that you don't like doing, try to outsource as much as you can so that you can spend time doing the things that are really important to you. And again, I know that's really tough sometimes, but you just don't want to be spending your precious time doing laundry if there's, and nowadays there's so many services that you can outsource things. So I had a great husband. We were able to afford certain support, and we outsourced a lot so I could spend my time when I was home with my kids. All right, well, thank you so much.